The wrestling world just witnessed something that nobody saw coming, and it's sending shockwaves through the entire industry right now. Ridge Holland, the powerhouse from Lancashire who seemed destined for great things in WWE, has had his contract terminated by the company after he decided to speak his mind publicly. This isn't your typical release where someone gets wished well in their future endeavors with a generic statement. This is different. This is WWE making a statement. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button now because this story is about to get wild. Let me take you back to where this all started. Ridge Holland signed with WWE back in 2020, and from the moment he stepped through those doors, people knew he had something special. The guy looked like he was carved out of stone, had legitimate rugby credentials from his time playing professionally, and carried himself with that rough and tumble authenticity that wrestling fans eat up. WWE saw money in him. They paired him with Pete Dunne and Sheamus in a faction that made sense on paper. Here was this bruising enforcer type who could throw people around the ring like ragdolls, and the company seemed committed to building him into something substantial. But here's where things get complicated. Holland's WWE run was marked by a series of unfortunate incidents that would haunt him throughout his tenure. The most notable and heartbreaking one involved Big E. During a match on SmackDown in March 2022, Holland executed a suplex that went horribly wrong. Big E landed on his head and neck, suffering a broken neck that could have paralyzed or killed him. The wrestling community held its collective breath as news broke about the severity of the injury. Big E has still not returned to active competition, and that moment became a dark cloud that followed Holland everywhere he went. Now I need to be clear about something here. Accidents happen in wrestling. It's a physical business where people are throwing each other around and executing dangerous maneuvers every single night. Nobody who was there or who has spoken about the incident has blamed Holland for what happened to Big E. Big E himself has been nothing but gracious and understanding about the whole situation. But in the court of public opinion and in the minds of some decision makers backstage, that incident became part of Holland's identity whether fair or not. Holland continued working after that incident, trying to move forward and establish himself as a credible performer. He had moments of brilliance in the ring, showing that raw power and intensity that initially got him signed. But something had shifted. The push seemed to slow down. The opportunities became fewer and farther between. Earlier this year, Holland was released from WWE in what appeared to be one of those standard contract situations where the company decides to go in a different direction. People assumed he would head to the independent scene, maybe make his way to another major promotion, and continue his wrestling career elsewhere. That's when things took an unexpected turn. After his release, Holland started speaking publicly about his experiences in WWE. He gave interviews where he opened up about the mental toll of the Big E incident, the pressure he felt backstage, and his thoughts on how WWE operated as a company. He wasn't throwing bombs or trying to burn bridges in the typical disgruntled former employee way. Instead, he was being honest and candid about his journey, the challenges he faced, and what it was like to live through one of wrestling's most frightening moments while trying to maintain a career. WWE apparently didn't appreciate that honesty. According to multiple sources close to the situation, the company made the decision to terminate the remainder of Holland's contract rather than let it expire naturally. This is significant because it means WWE actively chose to cut ties completely rather than let the relationship end on its own terms. When a company takes this kind of action, it sends a message not just to the person being released but to everyone else on the roster. The message is simple: watch what you say about us. The wrestling industry has a complicated relationship with free speech and public commentary. WWE in particular has a long history of controlling the narrative around their product and their business practices. Wrestlers under contract are generally expected to toe the company line, speak positively about their experiences or not speak at all, and never air any grievances publicly. When someone breaks that unwritten rule, there are consequences. Sometimes those consequences are subtle, like losing television time or being dropped from storylines. Sometimes they're more direct, like what happened with Holland. What makes this situation particularly interesting is the timing. WWE is currently under new ownership, with Endeavor having merged the company with UFC to create TKO Group Holdings. There were hopes among some in the wrestling community that this new corporate structure might bring a different approach to talent relations and how the company handles public criticism. This situation with Holland suggests that some things haven't changed at all. The machine still protects itself first and foremost. Holland's story resonates beyond just one man's career trajectory. It speaks to broader issues about how wrestlers are treated when they're no longer useful to the company, about the pressure to remain silent even after you've left, and about the real human cost of working in an industry that can chew people up and spit them out. The Big E incident traumatized Holland in ways that most people can't understand. Imagine being the person involved in an accident that nearly killed a beloved colleague and friend. Imagine having to get back in the ring the next night while millions of people are watching and judging every move you make. Imagine carrying that weight while trying to perform at the highest level and maintain your own career. The wrestling business is supposed to be about entertainment, about creating moments that fans remember forever, about building stars and telling compelling stories. But behind the curtain, it's also a business where people's livelihoods hang in the balance, where one mistake or one wrong word can derail everything you've worked for, and where loyalty only flows in one direction. Holland learned these lessons the hard way. Reports from backstage sources indicate that WWE officials were particularly upset about Holland discussing the company's handling of the Big E situation and the aftermath. He talked about feeling isolated, about struggling with guilt and anxiety, and about not receiving the kind of support he needed during that difficult period. These weren't inflammatory comments or attacks on specific individuals. They were honest reflections from someone who went through a traumatic experience and was trying to process it publicly. But in WWE's world, that kind of honesty is seen as a betrayal. The termination of Holland's contract means he now has freedom to work wherever he chooses without any restrictions. Ironically, WWE's attempt to punish him for speaking out has given him complete autonomy over his career moving forward. He can sign with any promotion, take any booking, and continue to share his story without fear of corporate retaliation. In trying to silence him, WWE may have actually amplified his voice. This situation raises questions about what wrestlers are allowed to say about their employers once they leave. Should there be an expectation of confidentiality that extends beyond the end of a contract? Should wrestlers be free to share their experiences, both positive and negative, once they're no longer collecting a paycheck from the company? WWE clearly believes they should maintain some control over the narrative even after someone leaves, but that position becomes harder to defend when you're dealing with independent contractors rather than full employees. The wrestling community has been buzzing about this story since news broke. Other wrestlers, both current and former, have been watching closely to see how this plays out. Some have expressed support for Holland and his right to speak freely about his experiences. Others have remained silent, likely wary of drawing WWE's ire themselves. The whole situation has created a chilling effect where people are thinking twice about what they say and when they say it. Holland himself has remained relatively quiet since the contract termination news went public. He hasn't gone on a media tour or tried to escalate the situation further. That restraint speaks to his character and his desire to move forward with his career rather than get stuck in a back and forth with his former employer. But make no mistake, this story is far from over. Where Holland ends up next, how he rebuilds his career, and whether he continues to speak openly about his WWE experiences will all be crucial chapters in this ongoing saga. The broader implications of this situation extend to how WWE operates in an era of social media and instant communication. Gone are the days when wrestlers could be released and quietly disappear into obscurity. Now everyone has a platform and a voice. Former talent can share their perspectives directly with fans without going through traditional media gatekeepers. This democratization of information makes it harder for companies to control every aspect of their public image. WWE's response to Holland suggests they're still operating with an old-school mentality that doesn't fully account for this new reality. Looking at Holland's in-ring work and potential, it's clear he has the tools to succeed wherever he goes next. His size, strength, and legitimate toughness make him an attractive prospect for any promotion looking to add a credible heavy hitter to their roster. The independent scene would welcome him with open arms. New Japan Pro Wrestling could use someone with his skill set. AEW is always looking for fresh talent with WWE experience. The options are there if Holland wants to continue wrestling. The question is whether the stigma of the Big E incident and now this contract termination will follow him or whether he can write a new chapter in his career story. What happened with Big E was a tragic accident that nobody wanted. Holland didn't wake up that day planning to hurt his opponent. Big E doesn't blame him. The wrestling community understands that these things can happen despite everyone's best intentions. But WWE's decision to terminate Holland's contract for speaking about his experiences transforms that accident into something more complicated. It adds layers of corporate politics and control to what should be a straightforward story about a wrestler trying to move past a difficult moment. The timing of WWE's decision also raises eyebrows. Why terminate the contract now rather than when he was initially released? What specifically did Holland say that crossed the line in WWE's eyes? These questions don't have clear public answers yet, but they're important because they speak to where WWE draws the line when it comes to former talent discussing their time with the company. That line seems to shift depending on who's doing the talking and what's being said. Wrestling fans deserve to know the truth about what happens behind the scenes. They invest their time, money, and emotional energy into following these performers and these storylines. When someone like Holland shares an honest account of their experiences, it adds depth and context to the stories fans have been watching. It humanizes the performers and reminds everyone that real people are behind the characters they see on television. WWE's attempts to suppress those stories ultimately serve the company's interests while denying fans a fuller understanding of the business they love. As this story continues to develop, the wrestling world will be watching to see how both sides handle what comes next. Will Holland sign with another major promotion and use this controversy as fuel for a comeback story? Will WWE face any backlash for how they handled the situation? Will other wrestlers feel emboldened to share their own experiences, or will they take this as a warning to stay quiet? These are the questions that will shape the narrative going forward. One thing is certain: Ridge Holland's name is back in the conversation. Whether that's good or bad for his career remains to be seen, but obscurity is often the bigger killer of wrestling careers than controversy. People are talking about him again. Promoters are thinking about him again. Fans are wondering what happens next. That attention and curiosity can be leveraged into opportunities if Holland and his team play their cards right. The wrestling business has always been about working people, about creating illusions and controlling perceptions. But in 2025, that game has become infinitely more complicated. Wrestlers have their own platforms. Fans have access to information from multiple sources. The truth has a way of coming out eventually, no matter how hard companies try to manage it. WWE's decision to terminate Ridge Holland's contract for speaking out may end up being a miscalculation that brings more attention to the very issues they were trying to keep quiet. If you've made it this far, you understand that this story is about more than just one wrestler and one company. It's about power dynamics, free speech, accountability, and the human cost of working in professional wrestling. It's about what happens when someone decides honesty matters more than protection. Make sure you're subscribed, because stories like this don't end neatly. There will be more developments, more twists, and more revelations as time goes on. Ridge Holland's wrestling journey is far from over, and WWE's approach to handling former talent who speak out will continue to evolve. This is just the beginning of what promises to be a fascinating chapter in wrestling history.